Hi, Tara. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. So let's start with, this is the first time you've been on the show.
Yes.
So why don't we start with sort of your background. How long have you been working for the city of Salinas? Sort of bring a little history about yourself and then what your responsibilities are today.
Okay. Well, I've actually lived in the city of Salinas since I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And I attended local schools, and when I graduated from college, I came back and I started working for the city. And that was it's going to be 20 years in September that I've actually worked for the city.
Yeah.
And since I've been here, I have been in the community development department. It's varied over the years. We had economic development as well. But in that capacity, I've worked in the current planning division and also in the advanced planning division, and that's where I'm currently assigned. And the advanced planning division, I work as a planning manager. I oversee the staff, and we work on comprehensive and long-range type of planning documents.
So very important, detailed, complex documents.
Yes, they're typically a lot of policy type of documents, like the general plan. Ones that have regulations or a vision for the future of the city,
Right.
Those types of documents.
Right. They pretty much govern how the city uses the land.
Absolutely, yes. The general plan is like what we call a blueprint for the development of the city. And the whole purpose of it is to basically set the course of development for the city in the future, to basically accomplish what the people who live here want to see happen as time goes on. And the general plan is typically like a 20 to 30 year document, horizon as far as development. So it's definitely long-term and very comprehensive.
So that was passed in 2003, 2002?
2002.
Okay.
Yes, that was the time of the last update.
Right. And what we're going to focus on is a future growth area and the specific area of this future growth area. So maybe you can relate the future growth to the general land use plan.
Sure. So in 2002, when the general plan was adopted, it anticipated that the city would need to grow. And so at that time, it decided to designate these areas we call future growth areas for those areas where the city would actually grow in the future. So one of those areas is called the North of Boronda Future Growth Area, and that's the area that is generally located north of Boronda Road in the northern portion of the city. And as part of that growth, the reason it was going to be in that area is they want to preserve ag land to the extent possible and also have an area that's developed in a comprehensive manner to ensure all infrastructure and circulation improvements, all that are done in a comprehensive manner. So the West Area Specific Plan, which is one of the developments that's going to occur in there, that was one of 3 large specific plan areas that was ultimately envisioned for that area.
Great. And so the full build out for the future growth was how many units originally?
Well, the annexation of the future growth area occurred in 2008, and it anticipated about 11,000 units for the entire future growth area located.
Yeah, that's massive. So when was the first big milestone in terms of working on that specific part of the future growth area?
So the West Area Specific Plan, after the property was annexed into the city, and again, the West Area Specific Plan is in what we would call the western portion of the North of Boronda Future Growth Area. So since about 2015, we've been working on the specific plan and the related entitlements.
Right. So what does the basic design of the plan look like? What will it entail? You mentioned circulation, for example.
Well, the specific plan actually covers 8 topic areas, and they range from, well, I'll just go through them really briefly.
Sure. Go ahead.
So you have an introduction, and that kind of talks about the existing conditions at the site, which are currently in ag use, and goes through some of the general provisions as to state law and other requirements that are applicable to specific plans. The next chapter is land use, and that calls out the various land uses that are going to be located in the specific plan. And the land uses include residential. We have a village center, which is a mixed-use commercial area. We have parks and schools and also some open space areas. And so it calls out all the various design plans in regard to to the specific plan.
So you mentioned all these different elements of the design and what would be in the plan, and what we call that is a specific plan?
The specific plan. There are other chapters as well. The circulation, which I kind of briefly already mentioned,
Right.
it goes into the type of roadways and what's needed to ensure, that there's adequate pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation.
Right.
We also have an infrastructure section because it's very important that we have, adequate infrastructure constructed so that obviously the residents can be served, and also that we have adequate capacity and whatnot. And that deals with things such as making sure that there's adequate sanitary sewer, adequate water, adequate trash service, things like that. And then we also have stormwater section. And that's important because the city has a permit for stormwater to make sure that we ensure water quality and recharge and things like that. And then there's also a section in there dealing with public facility financing to make sure how are we going to finance and how are we going to pay for some of these facilities that we are
Right.
going to need, such
Right.
as, for example, if we have a school site or something, or not, excuse me, a school site, if we have a park, those types of facilities.
Right.
And then lastly, we have what we call an administration section, and that just deals with ultimately how we actually apply those requirements and,
Right.
and see the development occur.
Now you mentioned stormwater. That is both a federal and state set of requirements for clean water.
Well, yeah, it's called the NPDES permit.
Right. So it's a state requirement.
Yes.
Yeah. So the city has an obligation really to meet those standards that the state sets forth as part of the stormwater requirements through this permit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then is that something that is done annually, or the permits, do you know if it requires an annual approval from the State Water Resources Board, or is that something that, the plan or the issue gets approved for several years and then it might get updated once in a while?
Well, I'm not an expert on the permit,
no.
but I know that it is approved, and then there's annual monitoring,
Okay.
and we have to ensure compliance. That we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
I know our Public Works Department works very diligently to
Yeah.
make sure that we are in compliance, and so that was one of the important things for the specific plan, is to make sure that we made sure the development that was occurring there was going to be in compliance with that. And for example, one of the things is making sure that areas are provided for what we call low impact development, which is areas where water can go in and recharge and be treated water quality
Right.
and go back in. And so that, to the groundwater.
Right. So it's confined to the site or the development site, right? So whatever
Right.
is
That was
produced there has to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
very important. That's one of the things that was a little bit different for the future growth areas when that project was originally coming forward. The regional board made sure that that we understood that there did need to be on-site
Right.
recharge and those types of improvements, so that it was adequately being addressed.
Right. So even though the city approves the plan, it's also there are state mandates and some federal, I'm sure, requirements as well that are hand in hand with the State Water Quality Board requirements. So it seems to me that's a separate issue, but has to be included in the plan, right?
Right, and that's why I
Yeah.
said we have numerous pages in the document
Yes.
dealing with design issues such as,
Yeah.
parking lots, parkways.
Right. It's really an important requirement. The reason I'm asking you so many questions because it's often misunderstood. People say stormwater requirements. Don't you just let that drain into the drain and it's all done? But there are many requirements to make sure that we're good stewards of the environment, particularly on the water side. So most of this is residential, but how much do you think of this build out on the west end would be for some commercial activity as well?
Right. Well, the entire site's about 797 acres. And as a result of that, the residential, as you said, does constitute the majority. I think it's about 400 plus acres will be in residential. But there's a village center commercial area that will constitute about 571,000 square feet of commercial mixed use. And that's the idea, is that's going to have a Main Street type of development where people can make it a destination for the specific plan, you know, people that live in there and also for people around there. And it's supposed to be very walkable. So you won't see necessarily like big box type of development, but you would see like perhaps a grocery store and other types of communities, you know, or local community serving types of uses, especially for that neighborhood and the surrounding area. And it'll have more what we call sort of a new urbanism type of style, where the parking is in back of buildings, where you have pedestrian amenities. And so people can walk there and, you know, perhaps go to a little restaurant or do some other type of local service.
So it's really, sounds like the priority might be the pedestrian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then secondarily it might be other modes of transportation, including the automobile.
Yes, and that comes from our general plan.
Okay.
The general plan, in requiring specific plans, as we talked about earlier, for the development of future growth areas, also mandated very specifically that they needed to be new urbanism in design, and basically that's constituted, you could say, pedestrian friendly.
So how large is the village compared to the residential development?
Well, the village center has about 20 acres, and the design of it is you'll come into the center, if you kind of consider it to be sort of a rectangle.
Okay.
You would come in off of Baranda Road, and then there would be that Main Street concept that I was talking about, where you would have building on either side of the Main Street, and so with probably like diagonal parking. And then the other types of, like the grocery store or something, would be located probably further to the rear.
Right.
And so it's going to again have sort of that like old town, maybe not like our old town, but sort of a vision that you would have when you used to go into towns, and there would be sort of a two-story type of Main Street type of thing in a smaller scale.
Right. That's great. So some commercial, not overly done, wouldn't compete with anything beyond the west area.
No, it's supposed to be really more for that area, you know, again, for residents in the specific plan area, and for those that are living adjacent.
Yeah, so let's get into the actual detail a little bit more of the residential. So the types of homes or residences that you might see and that are going to be designed and constructed in the West Area Plan area, what would those look like? What kind of sense of type, and, you know, are they huge mansions? Are they going to be, you know, 3-4 car garages, or what?
Well, again, kind of hearkening back to the general plan.
Yes.
The general plan also put in some requirements as far as wanting to see certain percentages of certain densities. And when we say densities, what that really means is kind of getting to those lot sizes.
Okay.
How many units can you get per acre?
Okay.
And one of the things that the general plan wanted to see in future development was that we do have higher densities than what we have currently in the city. So it mandated a minimum of 9 dwelling units per net residential acre, and that would be overall. But then it additionally set some percentages saying that you needed to have at least 35 to 45% of the housing in the density range of 7 to 14 dwelling units per net residential acre, and then also have additional units in the range of 16 to 24 dwelling units per net residential acre. Now, also single family at a lower density as well. But the reason it did that is it wanted to see more dwelling units being built that were in what we call sort of a medium and high range, so that we could get more types of dwelling units as well. Things such as row houses. Obviously, you would see apartments, but you could see types of housing, like we call them green courts, where you have housing around like open space areas or on walkways. We also have like duplexes and triplexes, but we're also putting those in sort of the single family areas. Where it'd be appropriate, like on the end of blocks or like adjacent to schools or parks. or also like in transition areas between higher and lower densities.
Right.
So the goal would be to provide a lot more housing types, because then you have a lot more affordability levels and a lot more housing choices
Right.
for people at different steps in their
Yeah.
life.
Are you getting some controversy on the density? It sounds like there's enough room to move up if you need to in certain parts of this development. So you get 9 here, you might get 16 over here, 14 on a different block, and then the actual overall would be a minimum of 9. Right.
It has to be a minimum, yes. Right. And well, we have had people indicate a desire to see even higher densities. Mm-hmm. So we actually did provide for the ability to convert some of the commercial square footage, the floor area of that, to actually residential uses. We also allow accessory dwelling units as well. Okay. And those would be the type of units that are located, you have a principal residence, and then they put a smaller residence in the back, and those are great affordable type of units. Right. They also provide income for the person who owns the front house, and those are also in addition to any the maximum 4,340 units that are actually allowed there.
So the full build out is anticipated as 4,340 residential, but that may take, 20 years, 30 years to do? And I don't know, the sequencing of how the build-out actually will occur, but that's probably still under discussion probably.
Well, yes, the build-out will be about a 20 to 30-year project. In a large project with this many units, when you're building 4,340 potentially, or even more, because as we talked about the density bonus and the conversion, that would even be on top of the 4,340. So when you're building that many units and other uses, like the parks, the schools, the village center, that takes time.
Right. How will the financing of these public facilities, infrastructure, parks, potentially libraries, fire stations, those kinds of infrastructure and facilities that will serve the public, how will those all be paid for?
Well, it varies. Yeah. In some cases, there may be assessment districts. We have like what we call community facilities district, or CFD.
Right.
That type of can pay for certain types of infrastructure and improvements, or roadways improvements, things like that. We also have what we call impact fees, like for traffic, for parks, and other types of uses, and then that can go towards paying for some of those types of uses and facilities. And like the schools, for example, they'd be required to pay school impact fees.
So the residential development will be over 20 to 30 years. The public facilities development will be over approximately the same time period?
Well, they would have to form assessment districts to pay for a lot of the early in the process as part of each mapping phase, most likely. And so I would assume that, it would have to run for whatever period of time, the assessment district would need to.
I mean, you wouldn't put a library there until you had enough residents that might demand a library.
Right. And actually there will be a new library site. It actually will be in the central area specific plan, which is also another project we're working on in the north of Boronda area. And also we'll have a fire station also, and that's right across Natividad Road. The fire station will be located there, centrally located. So, and it will also serve the west area and surrounding areas.
So, in terms of the most significant issues in terms of infrastructure, it would probably be the circulation or the roads and the pedestrian pathways. That may be the most expensive part of the public facilities that are needed for this development.
Well, the roadways, there are a lot of roadways. Obviously, we have arterials that surround the area. There's the property is bounded by San Juan Grade Road on the west, a Boronda Road on the south. Yes. Natividad Road on the east, and the extension of what we would call Russell Road. It currently doesn't go across the site, but it will eventually, and then also Rogie Road. So those are major arterials that will obviously need to be improved to help handle the traffic from this project, and also the general plan build out in general.
Yes.
This project alone doesn't necessarily require all of the improvements, but we do have other growth as well.
So started this project, discussions in 2008, basically. I mean, it really started intense, and then it really kicked up in 2015. And now we're in 2019. Are we getting closer to the final
We are.
approvals?
We are. So one of the things that also has to occur when you do a development like this is you have to do something called the California Environmental Quality Act Review, CEQA, and that's required to make sure that if there's any environmental impacts that occur as a result of the project, that we make sure we mitigate those impacts to the extent we can, and that we basically disclose and evaluate what any impacts could be. So we completed what we call an environmental impact report, a draft one, and we released it for public review in February of this year for a 45-day review period, and that ended on March 15th. So what we did is we circulated it to all agencies and to the public for comments. So we got comments back, and so we've been working on that. And then we've also been having some meetings as well. We went to the Traffic and Transportation Commission, and it was the Library and Community Services Commission, as well as we did a study session with the Planning Commission and the City Council in April. So after we have done those, and actually we just had a community meeting as well. We just had a community meeting, open house, that we held on just a couple of weeks, or actually just last week, to also talk about the project with people and let them learn and ask questions.
Right.
So we've been going through sort of some public outreach on the project. So the goal would be to hopefully wrap everything kind of up as far as community comment, and then take it forward to the Planning Commission for review and hopefully recommendation to the council. And we're hoping for that in July.
Great.
And then taking it on to the City Council, again, targeting August for that.
Wow. So all these community meetings and these commissions you're appearing before and informing them and answering questions, and the community meeting you just had, do you have a sense of reaction from the community? Or they say, wow, this is a wonderful project, or gee, I just have a lot too many questions about whether we really need this development? You know, what's kind of your sense of the reaction to the community so far? By the community, I mean.
Well, a lot of the community has known that this project has been in the making for a long time, but then there's always, individuals who are unaware about it. Most people are very happy to see that there's going to be housing coming. We have a lot of need for housing, and so people continually express the need for more. There's obviously a lot of desire for affordable housing. That's probably one of the most significant concerns, is how much is going to be affordable, what type of housing, and when is it coming.
Right.
And that's what we're hearing from most of the community.
So there's a lot of anticipation.
Yes.
Building up, and it looks like maybe more real than it's ever looked to the public.
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of people had heard we were, that this project was in the works, but since it's been a long time coming, they weren't necessarily sure that it was moving forward. So at this point, we've, gone through some of the hoops you need to go through, like I said, the CEQA process, working on that, doing some public outreach, different steps that you need to go through. And so we are now getting closer to actually having it, be able to be considered.
So let's talk more about the schools and the parks in terms of the development. Parks are always a big deal, where to put the park, how many, how large the park should be. Should it serve just one part of the future growth area, the West End, versus the central area and even the east side? So how are we looking at developing the park system in that specific west area?
Well, again, when we were sort of sitting down with the developers many years ago, we actually sat down also with other property owners and developers from the other potential specific plans, the central area specific plan, and even the east area specific plan, which is further to the east. to sit down and look at the park sort of holistically, saying, okay, we need to look at how is this park system going to function amongst the whole north of Boronda future growth area. Because while we want it to work obviously within each specific plan, there is a interconnection between the parks and how they function, especially with the community park.
Yes.
So in doing that, we decided basically that the West Area Specific Plan would need to have basically the community park, which is going to be about a 30-acre park, and that would be the community park for the future growth area that was shown in our general plan in that general vicinity. And that we also came to the conclusion that they would need to have 4 neighborhood parks and 6 small parks.
Okay.
And those parks have been distributed throughout the specific plan area. They're all within a 5 to 10 minute walk of all the residences within the West area. And it needed to meet what we have, it's called a Quimby requirement. And under Quimby, you have to have essentially 3 acres per thousand per capita, basically what it is. And so that basically equated out to the parks that they are providing.
Right. So the next step, Tara, is before the Planning Commission and the Council?
Yes,
Right.
that would be the next step.
Right.
Planning Commission consideration and recommendation
Okay.
to the Council, yes.
That may take more than one meeting
We'll
with the
see.
Planning Commission. But that's a requirement because they have, as a commission, responsibilities for specific plans and recommendations
Yes.
on these types of major projects to the council.
Yes, absolutely. A specific plan, and there'll also be a rezoning of the property. It's currently zoned new urbanism interim with a
Right.
specific plan overlay. And so as part of the approval of the specific plan, we'll rezone it to the appropriate zonings to allow
Right.
the various residential and village center and
Right.
different land uses in there. So they are required to make a recommendation on the rezoning and the specific plan,
Okay.
and any other entitlements we're taking forward to the council, and then the council is the one who makes the final determination whether to approve it.
Right. And then there's a instrument that the city and developer are working on called the development agreement.
Yes. The development agreement is basically a document that provides for both the vesting of certain development regulations for the developer and also provides assurances to us of
Right.
what's going to occur.
Right.
Things like such as what's the term of a development agreement,
Right.
for example, different things like that, what they're going to provide, what we're going to negotiate as far as,
Right.
different types of what they call exactions and things like that.
So you have to be very proud so far of the effort. I mean, you've been with this many staff person longer than anybody that I can think of. So it's can you see the light now at the end of the tunnel, or is that a train coming? I don't know.
Well, there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And we, of course, have another specific plan coming with the
Right.
Central Area Specific Plan. But yes, it's nice to see that all the planning efforts and everything that's been going on for so long will finally come to the point where it can be considered by the council ultimately, and the Planning Commission, of course.
Right.
And hopefully, provide for some of that needed housing that everyone isn't so desperate to see happen.
Well, congratulations. This is really a milestone to get it this far. It's not too far away from completion, at least the planning effort that will be the sort of the blueprint for how development occurs. So I want to thank you for being on the show, Tara.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great.